The morning sun filtered weakly through the half-open blinds of Eastbrook High School, casting long slants of dusty light across the tile floors. The halls were already buzzing, sneakers squeaking, lockers slamming, and voices rising in the clamor of teenage energy. But none of it reached the girl walking silently down the far corridor. Tessa Moore moved like a shadow. Not because she wanted to be mysterious, she didn't. She simply wanted to go unnoticed. At 17, Tessa had perfected the art of invisibility. Her hair, a dull brown, hung loosely around her shoulders, always brushed but never styled. Her clothes were plain, usually long cardigans or faded jeans, never flashy or trendy. She wore little makeup, and her voice was rarely heard unless she was called upon in class. Even then, she spoke so softly her teachers sometimes had to ask her to repeat herself. Tessa never minded. Blending into the background made school bearable. But bearable did not mean safe. Tessa had learned the hard way that silence, to some people, was an invitation. That quiet wasn't peace, it was prey. And for the past 2 years, she had been the personal target of Brielle Daniels and Shauna Myers. It began in sophomore year, not long after Tessa transferred to Eastbrook High. She was the new girl, moved in from the outskirts of town after her father's sudden passing and her mother's job transfer. That alone had made her vulnerable. But Brielle and Shauna didn't just sense vulnerability, they hunted it. They were beautiful, rich, and cruel. Brielle, the ringleader, had an icy blonde perfection to her that turned heads when she walked through the halls. Shauna, always at her side, was sharper, with a fox-like grin and a laugh that could cut glass. Together, they ruled the school's social hierarchy with a manicured iron fist. Tessa became their favorite toy. The prank started subtly. A spilled juice box on her seat. Her name written mockingly on the whiteboard when no one was watching. Gum in her locker vent. Trash Tessa became a common whisper in the hallways. She tried to report it once in sophomore year, but it had been her word against theirs. And they had a dozen witnesses willing to lie for them. So Tessa stopped trying. She kept her head down. She stopped eating in the cafeteria and spent lunches in the library. She walked home the long way. She learned to carry extra pens because hers would always go missing. And, slowly, she became invisible. Or at least she tried to. But the truth was, no matter how quiet she stayed, Brielle and Shauna noticed her. They seemed almost obsessed with her silence, infuriated by the fact that Tessa never fought back, never screamed, never even cried in front of them. And so they escalated. A shove in the hall. A binder snatched and dumped down the stairs. A cruel note slipped into her backpack. And through it all, Tessa endured. Until the day she didn't. It was an unremarkable Tuesday morning in late October when it happened, the day everything changed. Tessa sat in her second period U.S. history class, her notebook open, her pen moving silently across the page as Mr. Colburn lectured on the Bill of Rights. She sat in the far back corner, as always, trying to disappear into the beige walls. The classroom was warm, and the steady rhythm of the teacher's voice made everything feel far away, like a half-remembered dream. But 2 rows in front of her, Brielle and Shauna whispered and snickered. Tessa could hear her name among their words, followed by bursts of laughter. She ignored it. Her pen moved steadily, writing down dates and facts. The air buzzed with the low hum of the classroom, until pain exploded across her scalp. In one swift motion, Shauna had turned around and yanked a fistful of Tessa's hair, hard. The sudden force jerked her head down and forward, nearly slamming it against the desk. The room went still. A few students gasped. Mr. Colburn looked up from his notes. "Hey, what's going on back there?" Brielle burst into laughter. "Oops." She flinched. Shauna smirked. "I just wanted to see if her hair was real." Tessa sat still. Her heart pounded in her chest, her scalp throbbing. But she didn't cry out. She didn't shrink back. She straightened. And for the first time, she spoke not in a whisper, but in a calm, clear voice that cut through the silence like a blade. "That's assault," she said. The class froze. Mr. Colburn blinked. "Tessa." She stood up slowly, one hand resting on the desk for balance. Her eyes, usually cast downward, were steady now, level and unblinking as they locked on Brielle and Shauna. "I'd like to report a physical assault," she said again. "Right here. Right now." The smirks began to falter. Mr. Colburn cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Let's not overreact. I'm sure it was just." "No," Tessa interrupted, and her voice, though not raised, had a firmness to it that silenced him. "It wasn't a joke. It was deliberate. And it's not the first time. I've been documenting everything." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, zippered pouch. Inside was a USB drive and a small folder. "I've got 4 months' worth of recordings. Audio, screenshots, even a video in the cafeteria last month. All of it. I was going to wait until graduation. But I'm done waiting." She turned to the teacher. "May I use the classroom phone to call the police?" There was a stunned silence. Mr. Colburn hesitated, caught between protocol and disbelief. "Tessa, I think we should go to the principal's office. I already sent her an email with copies of the files. And the district superintendent. I've spoken to a youth legal advocate." Tessa's voice was calm, but her hands were steady, even as she gripped the folder tighter. "I know my rights. I'm done being quiet." The door to the classroom opened 10 minutes later. Officer Renee Collins entered with her usual no-nonsense stride, her badge gleaming against her dark uniform. She was a familiar face on campus, used to handling petty thefts and cafeteria fights. But this wasn't petty. This was serious. She didn't speak as she walked to the back of the class, where Tessa stood. "You the one who made the report?" Officer Collins asked. Tessa nodded. "Let's go to the office." Brielle and Shauna tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous," Brielle snapped. "She's making this up, she's obsessed with us." But Officer Collins wasn't interested in theatrics. "You two can come too. We'll sort it all out." The 3 girls were escorted from the classroom. The hallway outside buzzed with whispers as students peeked out of doorways, phones already being pulled from pockets. In the principal's office, the situation unraveled fast. The evidence was overwhelming. Video clips showed Brielle shoulder-checking Tessa in the hallway. One audio file captured Shauna saying, "Let's see how long until she cries." Photos documented vandalized belongings. It wasn't just a case of bullying, it was harassment. Repeated. Deliberate. Documented. Principal Harris, tight-lipped and pale, had no choice. She called the district office. The police department was looped in. The legal advocate Tessa had spoken to weeks ago arrived at the school by noon. By the end of the school day, Brielle and Shauna had been officially charged with harassment and misdemeanor assault. They were handcuffed, not for dramatic effect, but because the law demanded it when a student submitted formal charges with evidence. For the first time in Eastbrook's history, 2 of its most untouchable students were escorted out of the building, flanked by police officers. And Tessa? She walked home in silence, her bag slung over one shoulder, her chin held higher than it had ever been. She wasn't smiling. But she wasn't afraid. 1 week later. The story had made headlines, not national ones, but enough to spark a firestorm on social media. Local news ran the story with the title, "Quiet Teen Holds Bullies Accountable with Recorded Evidence." Eastbrook High was in chaos. Students took sides. Some were furious that their favorites had been arrested. Others, especially those who had suffered silently for years, called Tessa a hero. The administration, under public scrutiny, announced sweeping reforms, stricter anti-bullying policies, anonymous reporting systems, student legal rights workshops, and emotional safety protocols. They even held a school-wide assembly about harassment and consequences, with Tessa's case cited, though not by name. Brielle and Shauna were suspended indefinitely, pending the court outcome. Their parents threatened lawsuits, but nothing stuck. Tessa stayed quiet through it all. She didn't give interviews. She declined speaking at assemblies. She just kept showing up to school, sitting in her usual spot, doing her work. But things had changed. No one whispered, "Trash Tessa," anymore. No one bumped her in the hallway. And for the first time, other students sat with her at lunch, not out of pity, but out of respect. The legacy of silence broken. In the months that followed, 3 more students came forward with their own stories. A freshman boy bullied for his stutter. A transfer student who had been harassed over her race. A girl who had stopped coming to school altogether. All of them had watched what Tessa had done. All of them found their voices. And Tessa, the girl who once lived in silence, became the reason others started to speak. Because it wasn't just about hair being pulled in class. It was about the idea that no one, not even the quietest girl in the room, had to take cruelty and call it normal. She had drawn a line. And the whole school saw it.